Okay, so now we can move on to the cranks, which are the arms that your pedals go onto. The type of one you need will slightly depend on what type of bottom bracket you get, which I'll go into bottom brackets shortly. So basically you will need to get a crankset that will either go onto your bottom bracket if you're using a cartridge bottom bracket, or if you're using a conventional threaded or what you call it, a press fit bottom bracket, then there are spindles that are attached to the actual crank that you put through your bottom bracket, and it's all in one system. This is the most popular these days, but cartridge bottom brackets should not be sniffed at. They are very reliable if they are a bit weighty, so again it depends on your needs. The most important part that I suggest is your actual crank length. The most popular sizes are 165 millimeters, 170, 172.5 and 175. This difference doesn't sound much, but if you're into endurance cycling where you're going to be riding for a long time, you're going to need to get it right. Now some people think a longer crank will give you more power, load lever, you know. However, power as in watts over time is not just a measure of force, which is watts. Now you can create more watts with a longer crank, but if you want more power, it's the speed you put out them watts. And for a shorter crank, you're going to be able to put out more watts faster. So this should equal the same amount of power. That makes sense? So it's more important to get a crank length that's right for you to avoid injury, rather than thinking you're going to be down power. So how could the right crank help you avoid injury? Well, imagine you're pedaling with a 175 millimeter crank. It's one of the most common lengths. The distance between the top and the bottom of the crank is 350. If you were to swap that for 165, then the distance would be 130. So that's 20 mil difference. Now again, that doesn't sound much. That means that's how much less your knee has to come up every time you do a pedal stroke. And the more your knee comes up, the more shear forces go through your knee, and as a result can lead to more injury. The other benefit to having a shorter crank is that you'll actually have to move up your saddle higher, because the bottom of your stroke will be, say in the previous example, from 175 to 165, you're going to be 10 mil higher. So your saddle will be 10 mil higher. This will engage your hips further more, and you'll have a better aerodynamic position on the bike. I do recommend going to a bike fitter to get the right length of crank. Always go shorter, I think, than you need. Again, I'm 5'7". I have to say I'm between 165 and 170. I'm going to go 165 for having less injury and be able to keep riding than being able to ride faster for a short amount of time. It's just the way I prefer it. Okay, so next for your crankset, so assuming that you're not using a cartridge bottom bracket, you're going to need to make sure your spindle length is the right length to fit through your bottom bracket. So just make sure your bottom bracket shell is of a standard size. If it's not, then you're going to need to get a spindle or a longer spindle to fit through your bottom bracket. Some bottom bracket shells are made longer in order to make the bike stiffer, so just be aware of that. So the standard length is 68 millimeters wide, but just to let you know, it can actually go up to 86.5 millimeters wide, so that's quite a gap. You're going to need, as I say, a spindle length to accommodate that. Next is your spindle diameter, but I'm going to go into that more in just a second in the bottom bracket section. So I'll just leave that for now. There's different sizes of spindle, but I think that's more on the bottom bracket section. Don't need to think about that. But just be aware that the spindle diameter can be different and it has to fit the bottom bracket you choose. So a bit more on barrel adjusters. Just barrel adjusters can actually be found on the derailleurs themselves. They can be found up onto gear levers, or you can have a barrel adjuster inline. There's no real benefit to where you have them. Obviously if they're on the derailleurs, it's all the better. You don't need to faff about and have put one on your line. But in regards to what they're used for, they can be put anywhere. So the next part of the group set I want to talk about is the actual pedals. So what pedals are the best for adventure riding? So you can just get flat pedals. These are the ones we all know and grew up with. can wear them with any type of shoe, obviously. Some of these pedals have studs in them to help your foot from slipping off. Might be handy if you're on gravelly roads. The last thing you want to do is slip off your pedals. Flat pedals, depending on what they're made from, can be pretty heavy, compared to clipless pedals. And obviously, because you're not attached to the bike, you can only really push down and not pull up. So the next two types are known as clipless pedals, and might seem like a strange name for something that actually you clip to the bike, but it's called clipless because originally, I don't know if you remember, used to be straps that literally used to tie your foot to the pedal. I don't know if you remember, and this was held in place with a clip at the side. They were clip pedals. So these ones now, even though you clip in a different way, they're not the same as that, so they're clipless. That's where it comes from. Mountain bike pedal is a broad term that accounts for a few different types. Most popular are Shimano's SPD. Basically, a cleat which is attached to your shoe can clip into either side of the pedal. Once you're clipped in, you can simply clip out by just twisting your foot sideways, and your foot will come straight off. So as I said, there are so many different types and brands of mountain bike pedals that I'll be here all day if I want to talk about them all. So I put a link in the description to a page that goes through mountain bike pedals in much more detail. The greatest advantage for mountain bike pedals is that you use mountain bike shoes. These are much more easier to walk around in. The cleat is up in the shoe more than what a road bike or road shoe would be. So it means you can walk normally, and for adventure riding you're always going to be walking either into shops or up mountains, and depending on where you are. So yeah, that's a major consideration there, especially if you want to have clipless pedals and be able to walk around. Road pedals, again, there are lots of brands, and the most popular that I think are Luke. They are similar in the way you clip in and the way you clip out, but the main difference being you can only clip in one side. It takes a little bit more skill to clip in because you have to push the pedal around right, so you're orientated, the clip side is up. But once you get that down, it's pretty easy. This is done to reduce weight. The cleats are different too, in that they really stick out from the bottom of the shoe. This makes it very difficult when you want to walk. And these cleats, well, for Luke anyway, they come in different colours, and different colours relate to different degrees of float. Now, float is the amount it allows your foot to move before you clip out. So, say for a black cleat in the Luke, there's 0 degrees of float. So when you're clipped in, you're solid. You can't move. If you want to move, you're going to clip out. Grey, you have 4.5 degrees, and red, you've got 9 degrees. And I haven't mentioned for the mountain bike cleats, you do, I don't know how many degrees, but you do have a good amount of float before you clip out. For me, I would suggest having at least a grey cleat where you can have a little bit of float. As I think if you stay in one place for too long, that it can actually give you injury, especially if it's not set up properly. You can end up having knee issues. So why is the pedal bigger and why is the cleat bigger? Well, it's to do with power distribution, and I reckon with the bigger cleat, it allows you to give more power down into the pedal without causing issues like sore feet or anything like that. The shoe itself is a lot more rigid in the bottom. It doesn't flex at all, so it's really hard to walk in, and as I said before, the cleat sticks way out the bottom, so you're nearly like a tap dancer as you're walking around. I've ridden road shoes and mountain bike shoes for years now, and performance wise and comfort wise, I cannot see a difference. That's just me, it's the way I ride. It wouldn't be anything too powerful, but just for the ease of walking around, I think for adventure riding, mountain bike shoes and pedals are the way to go. So why would you use clipless pedals at all? Like, why not just use flats if you can use any shoes you want to be more comfortable? Well, believe it or not, studies have shown that clipless pedals have absolutely no advantages to wearing flats. I know that this sounds a bit controversial, but I come across a video by Dylan Johnson on YouTube, and yeah, he went into the studies a lot more than I'm going to go into them now. I will add a link to his video in the description, so check that out if you're interested. However, if you don't have time to watch it, I will just mention that the studies were all carried out on the turbo trainer, and I for one know that I pull up in the pedals significantly, especially when sprinting up hills. But this is just more while I'm training. If you're sprinting anywhere while doing an endurance cycle, then you're probably just sprinting away from angry dogs or something. So why would I bother if there isn't a big benefit while I do my endurance cycles? Well, there's a few reasons why I want to stick to clipless, and one is probably the biggest reason is to prevent injury. It makes sure that I place my feet in the right position every time. If I go for a long distance with my foot in the wrong place in the pedal, then I may cause injury over time. Secondly, my foot won't slide off the pedal. More than once I've slid off the pedal and crashed down hard on my nether regions. So that's probably a big enough reason why I wear clipless pedals. That can't happen again.